Hey everybody, Who's Your Jedi here with another review for you. This time I'm talking episode 9 of Legend of Korra season 3 called The Stakeout. Now as you can see, once again we're recording outside and you might be able to hear some classical music playing in the background. I'm actually doing this at the library just because things at my house are kind of crazy today and they, for whatever reason, have some classical music playing out of the PA system here. But hopefully that won't be too big of an issue. So anyway, let's get right into this episode. And this is another very good episode of the season, and this is where we finally get to get some really solid ideas as to what it is that the Red Lotus, who, because it amuses me, I will continue to call the Frightful Four, well, basically we kind of learn what their deal is, partially. And we'll talk some more about that in a moment, but let's kind of talk about what's going on with everybody else first. And let's just sort of start with Mako. Now, this is another episode where we really get to see that his training as a police officer comes in really handy. You know, it's really not helping the comparisons between Mako and Bruce Wayne that were so prevalent in season 1 when we see him here. But now looking back on things, it's really more of a case of Mako being more like young Jim Gordon than young Bruce Wayne, if you ask me. I think Lynn is trying to feel, well, I wouldn't exactly say she's trying to fill the Commissioner Gordon role, simply because she has a much more adversarial relationship with Korra than Gordon really ever had with Batman. But again, that's sort of how far can you stretch the Batman metaphor anyway. But anyway, as I said, this is another episode where Mako really gets to show that his time spent as a police officer has paid off handsomely. He's shown that he can really use his head and come up with strategies that work. It's sort of like he's in a lot of ways sort of the Sokka of the current team Avatar. You know, the guy who comes up with the plans. Now, Bolin gets some more interesting stuff going on with him this episode. He gets chased down by some crazy Nuktuk fans, and I love how the one lady gives him that Bolin doll, and he's just completely and utterly creeped out by it. This sort of reminds me of a rather infamous Total Drama fan who made a doll of one of the characters that was probably no small sort of amount of inspiration for a crazed Total Drama fan who actually ended up as a contestant on the show in season 3. So, you know, fans who just take things a little too far, you know, it is always it's usually amusing to see that sort of things, and occasionally creepy. But still, you know, give it up to the folks out there who have the creativity and skill to do things like that, I suppose. But we're getting a little off topic. Now, I do like that since this is an episode where we discover that the Red Lotus are naturally tied to the White Lotus, it's very fitting that Pai Sho makes a comeback here in a very meaningful way, and we get to learn a little bit more about, you know, Asami and Bolin. That it's interesting that there are both Pai Sho players, and of course, Bolin from his background plays sort of a street version of it, if you will, and Asami sort of plays probably what is the classical version of the game that Iroh probably would have been familiar with. And this is fitting because Pai Sho is, again, sort of based on, well, just about any board game, you know, anything from Mahjong to chess, where there are, of course, many, many variations of how you do things. Not really a surprise that Asami is a lot better at this than Bolin, simply because Asami does have that very analytical mind. And another thing about Asami that I like this episode is that Mako and Bolin, you know, they trust her to take care of Korra while she is helpless. Now, granted, Mako and Bolin are benders, so they are obviously probably the most qualified to go and fight other benders, which is not taking anything away from Asami. It's simply that Asami is dependent on technology and her own physical skills, which are not inconsiderable, but you know, she's never really fought any. She doesn't have the amount of experience of fighting people with a skill level of the two frightful four members that Mako and Bolin take on, and they lose that fight. In fact, it's for more or less, it's basically the waterbending lady Ming Hua who beats them both. So as good as Asami is, she probably wouldn't have lasted very long against those two. So not a huge amount more to say about her. And that, I guess, brings us to the real crux of this episode, is we get to finally find out what's going on with Zaheer and sort of the philosophy behind the Red Lotus. And in a nutshell, the Red Lotus are anarchists. Now, anarchy as a political idea is one of those things that has a very misrepresented view. People just like to claim it, like anarchists are kind of an easy go-to for guys who just sort of want to tear down everything and have everything all go to complete and utter chaos. I mean, there's even a thing on TV tropes of anarchy is chaos. Well, no, that's really not true if you look at the proper political definition of what anarchy is. And Zaheer lays it out very simply and accurately, is basically sort of saying that people should be free to live their lives without a state, be it a republic or a monarchy, controlling their lives. Now, anarchy, like just about any political philosophy, or like Pai Sho, comes in many variations and forms and extremes and whatnot. What Zaheer says, though, is basically kind of lays it out in the simplest terms. One of the things with like anarchy is that, unlike, say, democracy or communism, there is no sort of go-to book of ideas or dogma. There is no Thomas Paine's Common Sense or Marx and Engels' Communist Manifesto for anarchy. I mean, not that there haven't been many books written about anarchic political philosophy, but again, there is no, as I said, no go-to book for this sort of thing. So let's just sort of take it as, people should be able free to live their own lives and not have a government, bossing them around. That's basically what Zaheer is saying in a nutshell. And this kind of in a lot of ways harkens back to the more political aspects of what was going on in Season 1, where it was very much an issue of classism, the haves and the have-nots coming into conflict with each other. Now here, we're kind of puts Korra in a very similar situation where, granted, she could fight the Red Lotus, but fighting, say, the government of the Republic or the Earth Queen, well, that's a much more difficult thing. But again, we're going to see that with everything's going on, especially with Korra and Asami being prisoners of the Earth Queen by the end of this episode, that Korra is going to be in conflict with the Queen yet again. So this is one of those situations where Zaheer does raise a very legitimate point. Now, I'm a little bit more sympathetic to the Republic president just because of things that happened and whatnot. But Earth Queen Opal is a perfect example of why there is some validity to Zaheer's argument. She's a very cruel person. She doesn't care about other people. She is only interested in herself. And while she does have some legitimate political grievances, as we've already discussed in these videos, she's basically using her authority to abuse people, use them. There is no real consent of the governed in an absolute monarchy, which seems to be what we're dealing with in the Earth Kingdom, as opposed to a representative democracy, which is what we have over in Republic City. Hence, Republic representation. If you guys, seriously guys, if you paid attention in social studies class, this should all be pretty basic for you. But then social studies was one of my best subjects in school, so maybe I'm overestimating the simplicity of all of this. But anyway, so what I like about this is that just like Amon, Zaheer does have a legitimate point. The things that he's upset about are real, but he's going about dealing with this in the wrong way. And we're giving a reminder of this when he basically throws Ai Wei's soul into purgatory in this episode just to cover his own butt. I mean, Zaheer is a guy with a legitimate point, but he too is willing to hurt people to achieve his ends. He was willing to kidnap Korra and, as she said, basically raise her in a way that would have her brainwashed with his philosophy. Now, I do also like that she points out, says to him, well, okay, I'm certainly not at any place where you could raise me to in your beliefs now. What exactly do you plan to do in order to get me to do what it is that you want? And Zaheer just says, well, come find me and I'll show you. Sorry, I was distracted by them playing the music that's playing over the PA right now. Okay, I like that song. But anyway, boy, that's loud. Okay, I think we're gonna have to wrap this up here. Basically, Zaheer is really no better than the people he's fighting against, simply because he too is willing to harm people in order to get what he wants. And that's really not the way to go about getting what you want out of life, and certainly not the way in order to claim the moral high ground. So, exactly where is all this going to go? We'll have to wait and see. But I do really applaud the show for being able to really lay these genuine political ideas and questions out there on what is essentially meant to be a kid's show, and presented in a way that doesn't dumb it down for the audience. It's presented in such a way that both the young viewers and the older viewers can understand what's going on, see both sides of the argument, and still enjoy the story and have fun with things. And that's really, really great. Anyway, guys, we're going to call it here. Until next time, take care and have a good one.